How are you guys doing? Today is Saturday, May 14th, 2022. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile for Ruben Dias. The elite Portuguese defender for Manchester City turns 25 today, and what I'm going to do with this profile is give an in-depth look and I'm just going to thoroughly go through the statistics and his season since he's been a professional on the big stage, since he arrived on the Portuguese league to arriving where he is as one of the highest regarded players and one of the highest paid defenders in all of the game, in a league where, of course, I have to repeat myself, where hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are competing for his very spot. But of course, if you're not familiar with Ruben Dias, he stands at about 6'1". ESPN rated him as one of the best defenders in the world, not to mention that he would go on to make a couple of FIFA Pro teams throughout his days in the league, because he was referred to as one of the best players in the world, one of the best defenders, as he is coming off a season where he is the only Man City defender. He would sit along Kevin De Bruyne as one of two players from Manchester City that was named as one of the best 11 players in the world from last season, just to get a sense of how dynamic of a player he is. But just to go into his background, he is from Portugal, like I've already said, Amadora. He would find himself in the Benfica youth organization, and he would finally get himself promoted to play at the very top league for the very first time in his age 20 season in 2017-2018. This would be right before he would get called up he would get called up as a Portuguese national. In his very first season in the Primeira Liga as a Benfica first-teamer, he would go on to start 24 matchups for a Benfica side that would go on to finish as runners-up in the Portuguese league. This is a team that would also get knocked out of the Champions League in the group stage. However, they would go on to win the Super Cup within their country, beating Vitória de Guimarães, as this would be the very first big trophy that Ruben Dias would pick up in his career. Following that season, he would go on to help Benfica finish with 3 goals within the Premier Liga season, not to mention that following that season, he would get called up to the Benfica national team, where he would he would get called up to the Portuguese national team as a Portuguese player, to play for the Portugal national team at the World Cup in 2018. In Russia, they would go on to make it through group stage after drawing with Spain. They would go on to beat Morocco 1-0, with Ronaldo scoring the first 4 goals of the tournament for Portugal, and not to mention that he would go on to help them finish in a draw, as they would finish 1-1 with Iran. Uruguay would end up beating Portugal in the round of 16, so that is the reason that they would be eliminated in 2018. And even in that 2018 World Cup, he wouldn't really get any playing time, but of course, even making the team would, of course, be a big honor within itself. Not to mention also that he would get a couple of Champions League games under his belt that season, as he would get at least a couple of games to show that he was one of the better defenders in soccer. That was his first chance as a 20-year-old. His second season at the top level would be his age 21 season in 2018-19. In that season, he would go on to start all 32 of the games he would play in a season where Benfica would go on to win the Primeira Liga title. 2018-19 was the last time that Benfica would go on to win that title, as that would be the only title they would win. They would end up getting knocked out of group stage into the Europa League, as they would go on to make it to the quarterfinals of Europa League. The team that would end up knocking them out towards the very end would be Eintracht Frankfurt. Eintracht Frankfurt would end up losing to Chelsea in the next round, as Chelsea would go on to win Europa League in that season. But in that full season where he would lead Benfica to the Liga champion, he would go on to score 3 goals in the Portuguese league for the second year in a row. He would go on to add an assist for the first time in a season. And taking a look at how he fared defensively, he would make sure that the team would concede 29 goals in the 32 matches he played. He would have 14 clean sheets in Liga NOS, as this would be the second year in a row that he would have a double-digit amount of clean sheets within his career. In Champions League, in the 9 matches he played, the team would concede 11 goals in those matches, as they had a couple of clean sheets there. The team would have a couple of clean sheets in Europa League, as the team looked pretty solid there. Following that 2018-19 season, he had shown that he was one of the best players in Portugal, but he would return back to Benfica for his third full season playing for the club. And in 2019-2020, he would go on to start all 33 matchups in a season where Benfica would finish runners-up in the league. This was also the season that was impacted by COVID. They would go on to finish runners-up in the Taça de Portugal, as the team that they would end up losing to in the very end would end up being Porto. And then in addition to that, they would go on to win the Super Taça, as they ended up beating Sporting CP 5-0 in the very end. So that would be another trophy. That would be the Super Cup that he would be a part of, that he would actually get a hand in. He would score 2 goals, as he would also add 2 assists within that year as well. That would be the most goal assists that he put together in a Portuguese season. Not to mention that on the defensive side of things, the team would concede 23 goals in the 33 matches he played. They had 17 clean sheets, the most clean sheets that he would have in Liga NOS, and of course establishing that he was one of the best defenders in all of Portugal. And of course, he would help the team the team would concede 9 goals in the 6 matchups he played, as they would end up getting knocked out of group stage in Champions League. In Europa League, they would concede 5 goals in the 2 matches he played. However, following that 2019-2020 season, where they would finish runners-up in the league, in his last full season in Benfica, he would go on to compete with he would go on to compete with Benfica again for his 4th season, to start off his age 23 year in 2020. But then he would go on to get moved to Manchester City, and he would go on to start 32 games in a Manchester City season, where they would go on to win the Premier League, as this season in 21 would be the 3rd time that Man City had won it in a 4-year span. Not to mention, in that season, they would go on to win the League Cup, as in the final, they would go on to beat Tottenham Hotspur 1-0, as Laporte would score the game-winning goal there. They finished runners-up in the Champions League final, as they went all the way just to lose to Chelsea 1-0. But Ruben Dias was a very big part of Man City winning those 2 titles. He would score a goal on the offensive end, and on the defensive end in his very first Premier League season, the team would concede 19 goals in the 32 matches he played. His 17 clean sheets would match the most clean sheets that he would have while playing in Portugal. Not to mention that in the Champions League route, they would go on to play 12 matches. They would concede only 7 goals in that span. The team would, of course, have 6 clean sheets in those 12 matchups that they played. But just after finishing as runners-up there, but still going on to win the Premier League, and picking up his first European title, not to mention he would go on to win the League Cup as well. They would go on to compete with Portugal in the UEFA Euro Championship. Of course, it got delayed by a year because of COVID. In the 2020 Euro Championships, they would make it through the group stage with France and Germany in their group, after they ended up beating Hungary 3-0 in their first matchup. They would end up losing to Germany in the second matchup, as Ruben Dias actually had an own goal in that matchup. They would go on to draw with France in the third matchup to make it all the way through. Once they made it to the round of 16, they would end up losing 1-0 to Belgium. So that's the last time they were competing on a big grand stage as Portugal. But of course, Ruben Dias would be instrumental, at least in these games himself. But the team would concede seven goals in the 4 games he played, but they did have a clean sheet. Following that 2020-2021 season, this would lead us into the season that he is currently playing, which is his second full season with the Manchester City club, as he started 27 of the 29 games he's played this year. Manchester City has already run away, and I believe they are a couple of games away. They're 3 points ahead of second place Liverpool, at this moment, with 2 games left in their schedule, with 1 win, they should be able to lock it up. But of course, they are in the driver's seat to run away with the title, as he could win his second title in just his second year there. As of right now, he scored 2 goals and he has 4 assists this season within those 29 games. On the defensive side, he has been on a part of a defensive unit in Man City, who has conceded 16 goals in the 29 games he played, as he already has 17 clean sheets, which is tied with what he's done exactly last season. Not to mention that the UEFA Champions League route this year would see Manchester City eventually get knocked out by Real Madrid, but they would get knocked out in the semifinal round. Not to mention that in addition to that, in that particular race to the title where they would fall just short, the team would concede 10 goals in the 8 matches they played, as they only had 1 clean sheet. But that, of course, leads us to where we are right now, as Ruben Dias and Man City are definitely pushing for that Premier League title, as, of course, that is a very prestigious title to win. And if Manchester City were to win it this year, this season, it would be the 4th time in a 5-year stretch they would be able to do it. So that would be impressive if they did it. But with that said, I can't wait to see what Ruben Dias has in store for him. He's only turning 25. He has 5 more years left until he's 30. And he's already shown the world what he can do just at like 23, 24. He is getting better. He's not close to his peak. Once we get to his peak, we'll definitely know who Ruben Dias is as one of the best defenders in the world. With that said, I want to thank everyone for listening to this piece. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with more tomorrow. But I do have a profile after this. I do want to thank the Pro Football Reference website, the Footy Stats, the Transfer Marked, all those sites as well, even the Wikipedia articles. And hopefully by this time next year, I'll have more to say about Ruben Dias, and I'll have even more to say as time goes on, as the world of sports writes its own script. Thanks for listening. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with more tomorrow. Peace out.